Hello everyone. Maybe you know that I have been playing the French defense as black for almost 30 years, so I have got a lot of experience with that. But in this video, for the first time, I'm going to show you how can you beat the French with white. I will present you 5 most annoying variations for black, and that you can use some of them to beat the French defense. But before we start, let me invite you to visit my website, www.matbobula.com, and you can join there to my weekly newsletter. Every Friday you will get a weekly dose of chess with me, so you will receive some educational materials. You will receive educational newsletter every Friday, and as a bonus you will get the 10-week course to improve your chess when I describe 10 most important topics in chess. So before we start, just one quick remark. In this video, I will show you 5 different plans, and I want to explain you the main ideas connected to all of those plans. I don't want to show you all possible variations, but after that video, you will understand what are the most important things about them. So let's get started. So the first variation, you can see that this is of course the French defense, and the first variation that is very annoying for black, it's d3, d5, and now queen to e2. So this is the King's Indian attack, but not with knight d2, which is a very popular variation. Queen e2 is definitely less popular, but it creates more problems. Queen is pointing towards black's king, and what is also very important thing in that line, bishop is not blocked. That bishop is not blocked. After knight d2, bishop cannot be developed, and that bishop can be used in the attack on the king. Black usually develops, and white develops as well with knight to f3. White wants to make a fianchetto castling, because you can see that that diagonal is closed for the bishop. So white's idea is to complete castling before white starts to take any action. Black develops the standard way. That is, this is a standard way for black in the French defense. Knight goes there, castling, okay? And now black usually castles. There are some variations that black castles queenside, but variations are quite similar. So black castles kingside, okay? And now white plays e5. e5, that pawn can be protected by the knight, can be protected by the queen, by the rook. So you don't need to be afraid that you will lose it. But as the Alekhine used to say, pawn at the e5 signals attack on the king. So you are removing knight from here, and later you wanna attack black's king. Black has to go back, and now before white starts the attack, it's a good idea to play c4. So white is challenging the center here. And now in this position, in case black captures, it's a very bad idea. White can take it back. Now there is the open file. There is the d6 square. White has got definitely more space. So it's not a good variation for black. In case black ignores that, a good idea is to capture. And in a lot of variations, e6 is possible. So black cannot really ignore that. So black usually plays d4. But that move makes e4 square very weak. So it is possible in the future to maneuver that knight to e4, and that knight can attack a lot of important points in the black's position. So pawn goes to h4. White wants to start the attack on the king side. h4 move, the idea is to make sure that if white wants to, white can move piece to the g5, and also in the future, it is possible to push that pawn forward. So it has got 2 ideas. Black is trying to attack that pawn at the e5. And now white just plays bishop f4. I told you earlier that it's pretty important to keep that bishop open. So that bishop also can be used, to protect that pawn. Rook goes somewhere, and now knight is coming to d2. And later, white has got several ideas how to attack. Bringing knight to this place, playing knight to g5, of course queen can go later to the h5, pushing that pawn forward. And it's, first of all, usually black doesn't know how to play against that variation because queen e2 is not such a popular thing. And second thing, white has got a chance to get a very powerful attack on the king. And I have to say that that line, it brought me a lot of troubles when I was playing black, a lot of troubles how to play against it. So this is the idea number 1. So now let's take a look at the second idea. Second idea starts with knight f3. Second idea is another sideline. Black plays d5, like every French player will play d5 in this position, and you play e5. So this is a little bit similar to the advanced variation. The difference is that pawn is not at the d4. So pawn at the d4 cannot be attacked by black, but black usually plays c5 here. And now second variation is b4. So it is called the wing gambit. And why that gambit is so annoying for black? First of all, also it's not very popular. And black usually reacts in a very schematic way. I know it from my experience. I also know it from observing other players who are playing French. And black usually reacts by just taking this pawn. Black is just accepting there is a free pawn, why not? White plays a3, okay? And now black develops the knight at the c6. And the big problem in the wing gambit for black is how to develop that side. This is very challenging for black. How black is going to develop that side? Because pawn captures, bishop goes here, okay? And now white plays c3. And now that bishop has to go back somehow. But that bishop, if that bishop goes to the a5, then there will be a big problem with the diagonal, which is very annoying for black. So black has to keep bishop on the diagonal. But you can see that a3 is not available, b4 is no longer available, d6 is not available. After bishop c5, white is going to play d4. So black has basically two options. One option is bishop e7, but then bishop e7 is blocking that knight. Another option is bishop f8, but what's then? Because knight can be developed to e7, but if white will play d4 and bishop here, how black is going to continue? So after knight g6 later, white can just attack with the h4, h5. After knight goes to f5, you see, let me even show it to you. Here pawn goes to d4, knight to e7, bishop d3. And now you can see knight goes there, pawn can attack it. Knight goes to f5, white can completely destroy the structure. So it's not a great idea for black to play it like this. This is the reason out of those two bad options, black usually decides to go to e7, but now that knight is in trouble. White has got a very simple plan, so pawn goes to d4. Black is developing queenside, because queenside is much easier to develop. White plays bishop d3. That bishop is a very powerful piece when it comes to the attack. And as you can see, there is also pawn at the e5. So pawn at the e5, as I said before, signals attack on the king. Black plays a6, because, you know, this is the area that black can develop with no problems. Okay, white castles. Here and now white plays rook to e1. And the idea, I mean, rook to e1, rook can be moved later in the future like this. Now rook to e1 makes f6 also harder because there will be rook into the open file. And in some variations, the idea is to maneuver that knight into the attack. So white can bring another piece into the action. So black usually is playing on the queen side, because it's very hard to play on the king side for black. And now white can play, for example, the h4. The h4 has got very similar idea like in the King's Indian attack that I presented to you, because after bishop takes h4, now bishop takes h4 doesn't work because knight will take it, and knight at a5 is also a problem. So queen is overloaded. Queen cannot protect h4 and a5 at the same time, and it's a problem. So, and white has got a very strong attack. This is the variation that is very hard to play for black. So this is the second option, which is the wing gambit. Okay. Now let me show you the third option. The third option may look a little bit weird, but I have to admit when I saw it for the first time, it brought me a lot of troubles, even if I had got a lot of experience with the French. So white starts with the c4, pawn goes to d5, now white captures, and now white doesn't capture like this, and this is the variation that I faced many times. But now white plays queen to b3. And that line is called the Osnap gambit. It looks very weird at the first glance, but I have to admit that my opponent played this against me. I remember it was over the board. It was a 15 minutes game. And I spent, I think, like 5 or 7 minutes out of 15 minutes that I had got. What can I do in this position? It wasn't very obvious for me how to continue. That queen is attacking d5. It can be dangerous on the diagonal. And you can also see that there is a problem at b7 in the future. I remember I was surprised. I captured this pawn, but now bishop is coming to c4. So you can see that white is sacrificing a pawn. So white sacrifices the material, and white wants to get a very powerful attack. And first of all, it's not easy to play. You can surprise your opponent with that variation. So black has to protect f7. Queen is moving somewhere, but now it's also blocking another pieces to develop, and white just develops. So knight is closer into the game. It has got also those two options. Okay, black plays here, and now white plays d3. This is a very weird move at the first glance, because it looks like white sacrifices another pawn, but this is exactly the point. So white develops all of the pieces. Black is up 2. That pawn probably is not gonna stay here for a long time, but so white will probably take it back. But the black's problem is that, and white can castle here, that white pieces are really well developed. And it's very hard to develop. Black has got a problem how to develop that bishop, because queen has to protect this. How to develop another bishop, because that piece also has to protect that pawn. And white has got a huge advantage in the development. Later white can play knight to f3, rook to h2, e1, and all of white's pieces are involved into the attack, as you can see. So this is also a very, very tricky variation. And if your opponent doesn't know that, and there is a small chance that opponent will know that, I didn't know that I didn't know that line after 25 years of playing the French defense. So you can really surprise the opponent. Okay, so far you know three variations, three annoying variations for black that doesn't start with the d4. But now let's take a look at d4. Of course, is the main move in this position. Let's just take a look into two lines that are happening here. So one line is e5, which is called well-known advanced variation, and black answers usually here. But now white doesn't play c3, which is the main move. White doesn't play knight to f3, which is the second most common idea. But white plays queen to g4. That thing is called the Nimzovich attack. So you can see that queen at the g4 is pointing towards g7. Of course, that means that white is going to attack on the king side somehow. Black usually accepts that pawn, and white just develops. White has got that queen is here. White's idea is to develop the knight. Later, white wants to move bishop to d3, so bishop is also can be involved into the action. Later, white wants to castle. If white wants to protect the e5 pawn, there is rook e1 or bishop f4. It is also possible to push that pawn forward. That knight is usually coming to d2. And later, white can also, in some variations, play a3, b4, and knight to b3 and try to take that pawn back. So, as you can see, it's a very, very powerful development. And also, black has got not that much space in this position. Okay, so let's take a look. Black usually plays knight to knight to c6. Okay, bishop goes to d3. Knight g7. Black has to somehow develop. Black cannot start with the bishop because pawn at g7 is hanging. White castles. Knight g6, attacking that pawn. And now rook e1. White develops. And now white's idea is to push that pawn forward. So black usually plays queen c7, putting more pressure. Now I don't recommend this move because exchanges are only helping black. But white can just play queen to g3. Bishop develops and now white plays h4. So in the Nimzovich attack, you can see that it's a very good development for white. It's a great idea to play for players who want to attack. So this is the option number 4. Okay, and now let's go back to this position again. And now let me also demonstrate you the final variation, which is called the Schlechter line. The Schlechter variation starts with bishop d3. And this is probably the safest option for white out of those 5 options, because you can see that most of variations, they are based on that white is sacrificing material and white is getting some activity. This is the variation that is very safe. You don't have to sacrifice anything. And usually black doesn't expect bishop d3. Black usually expects advanced variation or exchange variation, or knight c3 or knight d2. But bishop d3, it's not as common as other moves, and this is the line that can still create a lot of problems. Maybe you are not going to beat the opponent in 15 moves or in 20 moves like it is possible in previous variations, but you have got a great chance to get a slightly better position. And now black has got several ways of playing. In case black captures at the e4, then bishop takes it back. That bishop here is very annoying because how black can develop that bishop? This is a challenge. Knight goes here, white moves bishop back. Black is trying to play c5, which is a very typical idea. Knight goes to e2, protecting that pawn. Knight c6, bishop e3. You want to just complete a standard development. You don't mind to exchange. In case black captures, queen captures, bishop captures. And you can see that this position, it's not the endgame, but position without queens, white has got the advantage because white is better developed. And also those 2 bishops are very, very powerful in this position. So this is the reason why black usually plays knight to e5 and white develops. You know, black is playing moves that are, improving their position. Okay, now black can take it, queen captures. And later the idea is to castle queenside. And you can see that that white has got better development. And what is also important, it might be important for some of you, in this position you can see that it's equal on the material. So you don't have to sacrifice anything. After bishop d3, I told you that there are more options that black can play. D takes e4 is the most common. Some of the players, they are also playing c5. In this case, white captures. And now in case pawn captures, then it's a good idea to capture here, and black has got an isolated pawn at the d5 that can be a target for the middle game. In case queen captures, there is a very funny variation. So white plays knight to c3, attacking that queen. And now in case queen captures g2, it's a big mistake because after bishop e4, black loses the queen. Queen is trapped. In case queen captures here, there is a very powerful variation, knight b5, attacking and creating a fork threat. Here bishop is going to f4, trying to enter with a knight. Knight goes to a6 and now queen goes to e2. And later idea is queenside castling, and okay, in this case white lost material, white sacrificed the pawn, but white has got a huge attack. Okay, so let's go back also to the starting position. You need to also know that knight f6 is a possible line, but in this case white can play e5. After this move, white can just develop. Pawn at the e5, of course, signals attack on the king. Later, a good idea is to castle. After c5, play c3, rook e1. And later, a good idea is to use that idea that I mentioned earlier. I think I mentioned that in the wing variation, you can bring the knight towards the king side and attack that king. Those knights together with that bishop, with a queen and with pawn at the e5, it can create a lot of problems to the opponent. So to sum it up, I just showed you 5 ways how you can surprise your opponent that plays French defense, and how you can play a very annoying variation. So the first line was King's Indian attack with Queen e2 in the third move. Second option, it was the wing gambit against the French. Third option was that thing with Queen b3 called the Osnap gambit. Fourth option was the Nimzovich attack, a very attacking way how you can play in the advanced variation. And the fourth, the last one, the fifth one, was the Schlechter variation. The safest, but you will not beat opponent in 20 moves, but you have got a huge chance to get a slightly better position. Okay, thank you very much for watching. Hope you learned something and hope that video brought you some of the ideas how you can surprise your opponent in the French. Don't also forget to visit my website www.matbobula.com. Join my newsletter. Every Friday you will get a weekly dose of chess. Thank you very much and hope to see you next time.